Hello and welcome to this Chemistry World webinar. I'm Ben Fowler, I'm Digital Editor of Chemistry World. Today we're going to be looking at how social media can play an important part in business-to-business marketing. I'm sure you're all very familiar with social media and the types of platforms that we have available to us. There are lots of different ways that social media can be a massive benefit or a big pain for any business, and in particular business-to-business digital marketing is being transformed by social media, so your customers will be using it even if you're not. So throughout this webinar we're going to highlight ways that social media can generate business leads, ways that you can stay closer to your customers and promote your business. So we're going to cover the unexpected challenges that people experience when using social media and hopefully how to avoid those pitfalls. We will look at social media tools and channels that businesses in the chemical sciences are using successfully. So we'll be looking at things like LinkedIn and Twitter and the ones that you're familiar with. And we will also go through a checklist to help to develop an effective business-to-business social media strategy for your company. But by the end of the webinar, hopefully you will understand how social media can be used to promote your business. You'll know how each social channel that we look at can be used within a marketing mix and how to develop a social media strategy. And we're hoping that you'll gain the confidence that you need to use social media for lead generation, to build your online reputation and to stay closer to your customers. Now, we can't do this on our own, so we have invited Susan Hallam, the Managing Director of Hallam Internet Limited. She's one of the UK's leading digital marketing experts. She works both as a speaker and a practicing is a full-service digital marketing agency with significant experience working with clients in the life sciences, manufacturing and business-to-business sectors. So I think Susan is exactly the right person to tell you not just how to use social media, but how to use it specifically for the sorts of fields that we know that Chemistry World's followers and listeners will enjoy. Once again, I'm Ben Fowler, Digital Editor of Chemistry World. You can ask me or Susan any questions using the box on the side there that you should see logged in to go to webinar. There's a questions box on the side. If you just type into that anything that you want to know, we will make sure we try and get through your questions. We have an hour ahead of us and we should be leaving at least the last 15 minutes. So any questions that you would like to ask, then do please go ahead. And as always, there are no stupid questions. If there's something you don't understand, if there's something that we have glossed over, social media is one of those fields where a lot of people know a lot of different things, and it may be that we are assuming knowledge on your behalf, so please do not be at all afraid to ask a question. If you've thought of it, the odds are someone else has thought of it as well. So I think that's enough. We will have a couple of polls to get your opinion as we go throughout, but I think I can now hand over to our speaker for today, Susan Hallam. Susan, thank you ever so much for joining us. We're going to hit the button now to give you control of the webinar. So hopefully the next thing that people see will be your screen, and then you can take it away. It looks like we're good to go. Thanks again, Susan. I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Ben. Hello and welcome to all of you. I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to join this webinar. And over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, I'd like to give you a practical overview of ways that your business can be using social media to be more successful. I thought it might be interesting to let you see what I look like. I'm speaking to you today from the beautiful city of Nottingham, where our company is based. And by the way, you will have noticed by now that I'm not originally from Nottingham. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, but I live here in the United Kingdom. I am a British citizen, and when people hear me, they think I sound like the Queen. During the course of today, I'm going to be drawing from our experience of working with businesses like yours who specialize in the chemical industries. Of course, here in Nottingham, we do have BioCity, and we work with a number of businesses that work in this particular area. We've put together an exciting agenda for you today. I just wanted to take a moment to let you take a look through this, to remind you of where I'm going to be going over the course of this webinar. And I hope it's going to give you some useful information for you to be looking at. I am going to be drawing on three core assumptions during the course of this webinar. First of all, that social media is important to your business. So whether you're using social media or not, trust me, your clients are, and it can be adding value to your business. And what we'll be talking about today will be ideas like return on investment, and the kind of benchmarking that you need to do for social media to be part of that mix. The second thing to keep in mind is that your clients are online, so you do need to go fishing where the fish are. So we're going to be talking about using social media because this is what your clients are expecting. And finally, I'm going to be focusing purely on business-to-business use of social media. I am not going to be covering your personal use of social media. It's purely about how your business can be more successful. Now, what would be useful for me right off the bat would be to get a good feel for who's here participating. And I'd like to introduce our first poll, which is how important is social media to the success of your business? So Ben, over to you. How important is it to everybody participating?
Well, that is a very good question. So we will run our first poll now. So those of you who are watching the webinar at the moment, you should see very soon on your screens, in fact I can't see where our poll is, very soon on your screens you should see a question. In fact, I don't seem to be able to find it right now. So the question we were going to ask is how important social media is for the success of your business. Here we go. And we'll launch the poll. So you'll have the poll on your screen, and we're just going to give you a short while to respond to that. Now, these are very, very useful for us because they give us an idea not only of what it is that you're thinking, but also we can make sure that we tailor the webinar as we're going through to make sure that we're giving you the sorts of detail that you want. So we do appreciate that you do vote in the polls. And I get to sit here and watch as more and more of you vote, and I can start to see how the results are coming through, and we will share those results with you straight away. So I think we're getting very close to everybody who wants to vote having voted. I think that's probably enough. So we'll close this and display the results now. That's probably not an unusual spread. I think most people, well, half of you have said that social media is somewhat important. Susan, is this the sort of spread that you'd expect? I have to admit, I'm surprised to see that nearly 20% of the people in this webinar currently don't use social media at all.
That's it. So I do think that you'll find, particularly in this B2B environment, that there will be a core of businesses that aren't using it yet, and I think primarily it's because they don't know what it is that they're going to achieve or what benefit they should be looking for. So these numbers don't surprise me, and that's why we've put this webinar together, to give you practical steps forward. For those of you who are using it somewhat, what we want to do is to get you even better at using it as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much. There will be more polls coming in, so thank you very much, everyone, for filling those in. We will hand control back over to Susan, and you can carry on.
Excellent. So thanks for helping me out with the poll. Have you hidden the poll results, Ben? Yeah? Thank you. Let's start with the first assumption in terms of the webinar, and this is essentially that social media is going to be putting some personality behind your brand. And this is going to enable you to use it in a sense as a proxy for yourself. Although I specialize in digital marketing, I'm a firm believer that people do business with other people. So if you're going to be using social media successfully, we need to think, what kind of promise do you make your customers? So in my case, we are expert at what we do, but we're also fairly friendly experts. So you need to be thinking with your social media, what kind of values do you want to be conveying, whether it be humorous or expert, serious or warm. You need to be thinking about this kind of branding. And one company who's thought about this already is one that may surprise you, is Maersk, the container shipping company. And they've produced an exceptionally useful website where they describe their use of social media, their objectives, what they're trying to achieve. So you might a little bit later want to go on to Maersk line, where they outline their entire social media policy, which I think is, although it's container shipping, I think it's the fact it's business to business that you all might find this useful. And what I wanted to do is to give you the very quick summary that they're using social media to get close to our customers. So what they're trying to do is, by staying close to their customers, they're trying to ensure lifetime customer value. They're trying to ensure that customers are not defecting to the competition, that the customers are that they have Maersk top of mind when they're thinking about buying new product. So the first thing I want you all to be thinking about is, what exactly is your goal for social media marketing? It might be lead generation. It might be about raising your expertise and profile. It may be about getting close to your customers. And once you have that sorted out, you might then want to think about, how might I use each channel in support of our overarching objectives? And I've given you here 3 starters for 10 as to reasons why you might use the 3 primary social media channels that we're going to talk about today. Twitter is all about getting access to our news and information. LinkedIn is about meeting our people and joining in our conversation. And Facebook is about learning about our people in terms of our videos, our staff, corporate social responsibility. So one of the next steps in social media marketing is going to be to identify the purpose for each channel. Why are you using the channel? And if you're using it well, what should you be expecting to happen? Now, one of the channels that you might not have expected is going to be Google. And this is where I would like to start today's conversation because, of course, Google has a social media channel called Google+. And you may not be thinking about this in terms of social media, but the reason this is important is Google is hugely interested in social media marketing. During the course of today, I'm going to be talking about a particular company called Radley's, who provide chemistry equipment. And I'll be using them as an example to illustrate some of the main points. But in this particular example, I've searched for Radley's. And in the search results, of course, you can see that Radley's rank #1 in the search results. But have you noticed underneath that it is their YouTube channel, it is their Facebook page, and it is their LinkedIn page that is appearing in the top of the Google search results. So one reason that you might want to be using social media is to ensure your visibility in a digital world. You control what you look like in the search engine results. And indeed, social media marketing is an important signal to Google in terms of your importance in the digital space, and it will have an impact on your search engine optimization, which is obviously your ability to rank in the search results. Continuing on our Google theme, I also wanted to mention to you Google's social channel, which is known as Google+. And in this particular example you can see on your screen, I've searched for Hallam Internet, and on the right-hand side of the screen, highlighted in red, you will see the results coming from Google+, which is Google's free directory of all the businesses in the world. So I have a Google+ page for my business, and in this page you can see that it will give our address, phone number, contact hours, but two more things that Google+ will provide are those all-important gold stars. You'll recognize stars from sites like TripAdvisor and Travel and Tourism, but it's also widely used in business-to-business marketing. So what these are trust signals where your customers are reviewing your products and services, and these stars appear right in the search results. Reviews are an important part of the social ecosphere. What it will also do is display the reviews in their entirety. So you can see that we have 3 reviews appearing here where people are talking about our products and services. So if my objective for you today is to have an action plan of things you're going to take away and do, one of the first things that you need to do is to search for your company name, look to see if your Google+ appears, check to see if you have your Google stars. Is the information accurate? And if this is not the case, then you need to get sorting out your Google+ account. Also within the Google stable of products, of course, is YouTube, another of the social channels. And of course, Google owns YouTube, and you'll find often that when you search on the Google search engine, you will find that YouTube videos will rank right at the top of the search results. So in this particular example, if you were to search for plastic injection molding, you'll find that this YouTube channel ranks #1 in the Google search results. So do you want to be using social media to control what you look like in search? Do you want to use social media to improve your rankings so that you can reach new customers? I'd also like to point out that this YouTube video about plastic injection molding has been viewed more than 1 million times. So the social media may have different objectives for different kinds of businesses, but getting found in Google might tick some of the boxes for some of your businesses. Now, I started with Google, but I'd like to move on to now the channel that you probably thought I was going to speak about, which of course is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is typically the social media channel that business-to-business marketeers are most comfortable with because it is, of course, the premier business-to-business marketing outlet. I'd like to move on now to the second of my polls to get a feel from you all about what is your current level of experience using LinkedIn. Ben, over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. So let's get that poll launched. So LinkedIn is often regarded as being your public CV, I think, and many people do use it in that way. In fact, it's often said that it's a bit of a giveaway to your colleagues when you start updating your LinkedIn profile regularly. And so we'd like to know how regularly you use LinkedIn for your own work. So you can see the options on there. We're watching your results coming in. One thing I wanted to ask, just while people are responding to the poll, you talked about how people set their social tone of voice. And one thing I wonder, should people have a different tone of voice for their social media presence compared to their main brand? Or do you think it's better for a brand to be consistent across social and the other spaces that they exist in?
That's a really good question, Ben. And I think really what we need to, the real question is, what are your company values? What's important to your business? And these values will then drive things like tone of voice. And clearly, if you're inconsistent in your print as to what you are on social, people are going to see that that's artificial. So I think to answer your question briefly, you should have a single tone of voice that conveys your values across all of your marketing channels.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I think we've given people enough opportunity to vote now, so we'll close out and share the results. It seems that by and large people are using LinkedIn quite frequently. Very few of the attendees here don't use LinkedIn at all. It seems a few more people are checking it on an occasional basis. But I'm reasonably pleased to see that many people are using it so frequently because, as you were saying, it is such a powerful tool for B2B marketing.
Exactly. And whilst Ben mentioned the fact that LinkedIn is used obviously in the recruitment process, and clearly LinkedIn generates its revenues from the recruitment and from advertising processes, the purpose of our conversation today is to talk about how you can be using it within your B2B marketing. Do you need to hide the poll results then for me, Ben?
Yes, let's hide the poll results now and you can carry on. Thank you, Susan.
Excellent. So if we're looking at B2B marketing, what we need to keep in mind is that there are literally more than 1 million people on LinkedIn all publishing all kinds of information. So keep in mind that what we can do on LinkedIn is allow you to create status updates, to write to write long-form posts where you can publish information in support of your marketing activity. And the real theme that I wanted to use for LinkedIn is the phrase thought leadership, which means in the chemistry community, I hope you are good at what you do. You are expert at what you do. And if I have a question about a type of equipment, you are the person I should be asking. While there's 1 million people on LinkedIn, trust me, there are not 1 million thought leaders on LinkedIn. So because I don't know if you've noticed as much as I have that people are starting to put pictures of kittens on LinkedIn. People are starting to share all kinds of content that's more appropriate for other channels like Facebook. What I want you to be thinking about in terms of your use of LinkedIn is I want you to be positioning yourself as a thought leader. And what that means is you are the trusted authority, and that if I need information, you are the go-to person for me to ask that particular question. So I want you to be a thought leader, that you're recognized at what you're good at. But thought leadership has a second element, and that means that you're going to profit from being recognized as such. So not only are you going to be giving away your expertise, obviously in a controlled fashion, you want to be giving it away in order to drive more sales to your business, that it's going to increase the average order value that you're going to be getting. So I want you to be thinking about thought leadership, and it can take two forms. The first thing is you can create on LinkedIn what are called status updates. So again, with Zika virus, with things going on, you're going to find that people are writing status updates that are having to do, let's say, with corporate social responsibility, but they are still in the context of you being very, very good at what you do. So thought leadership, an easy way for you to be a thought leader in LinkedIn would be for you to share, to comment, to like what other people are saying that are also very influential in the chemistry sphere and in that sector. So in this particular case, I can see that Robert Sloan has liked something that has come from the global head of R&D at RB. The other alternative for you to think about on LinkedIn that I think works exceptionally well is the ability for you to write posts. Now, a post is the ability, rather than writing a short, snappy little status update, you can write a longer, detailed article. And in this case, Andrew, who's the chief executive at Dow Chemical, has written an article about how chemistry is turning science fiction into fact. And this article runs, let's say, to 500 or 1,000 words. And it has been published on the LinkedIn network. Now, I know it's a little bit hard for you to see, but in red, you can see here that I have circled the fact that nearly 15,000 people have viewed this article. 500 people have liked it, and nearly 75 people have commented on it. Essentially, by creating valuable, high-quality content on LinkedIn, this will enable you to reach new audiences. So keep in mind, if I like or comment an article that you have written, it will then also reach out to all of my other contacts. So we're going to be using LinkedIn as a thought leadership activity where you are going to write expert articles. They're going to be reaching out to your connections. But what's more interesting about writing posts and thought leadership pieces on LinkedIn is that LinkedIn also has something called LinkedIn Pulse. And essentially these are thematic channels where particular groups of people get together who are interested in pharmaceuticals, they're interested in healthcare, they're interested in oil or energy or green business, and the editors of these channels are looking for posts that they can feature on Pulse. So what you need to do is be writing the kind of articles that are specifically targeted to, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry. And that way, if the editor of the Pulse chooses to feature your article, this is how you are going to reach the tens or hundreds of thousands of people who are interested in that particular sector. Notice, by the way, that I have chosen not to feature chemistry as one of the Pulse channels. And as I mentioned, this is where you want to be writing for your target market, people who are in these industries who want to be buying your products and services. So we could be using LinkedIn as one of our objectives is to position yourself as a thought leader, and you're trying to reach individuals who are in the sectors that you want to be selling to. Now, another way to use LinkedIn, if we continue this theme, is for you to search to find the people who might want to buy your services. So in this particular example, I'm now using the advanced search in the LinkedIn section of the site that I'm searching for the phrase raw materials research. So I'm looking for people who are interested in raw materials, and I've limited my search to only people who are in the United Kingdom and people who are what are known as my second-degree connections. And as I'm sure you know, essentially a first-degree connection on LinkedIn is somebody that I know, that I'm connected to, and second-degree connections are the people that you know that I don't know yet. By searching for second-degree connections, what that means is it's going to bring up the names of individuals who also know somebody else that I know. So in this particular example, if you look at the fourth person down on the list, here's a lady called Claire Summerson, and she's an R&D scientist at Cold Harbor Marina. And she was previously, by the way, a lab technician at Northern Foods. She's a second-degree connection, so that means Claire knows somebody that I know. If I click on that link, it will tell me who this person is. And I can be using my networking skills to get in touch with these people to say, hi, Ben, you know Claire. Do you mind letting her know that I might give her a ring to talk about this new set of chemistry equipment that we're just bringing to market? So your objectives for LinkedIn could be to position yourself as a thought leader, to get reach and to be found by people who haven't heard of your company before. And the third reason you might be using LinkedIn is as a prospecting tool to support your business activity. So I hope that gives you some practical ideas for LinkedIn. But what I also wanted to do is to give you some idea of what you might want to be doing in terms of social media if you've only started using it fairly recently. And this task is called monitoring your digital footprint. And that means even if you're not real busy on LinkedIn, trust me, your customers are busy on LinkedIn and they could well be talking about you. Now, the first of the tools I want to mention to you is a free tool called Google Alerts. And what this does is allows you to put in a key phrase, and it will notify you anytime anything appears on the internet that corresponds to my phrase. So I could, for example, put in the phrase jacketed lab reactors, and you can see in the results below that what it will do is to show me blog posts, articles, websites that have to do with jacketed lab reactors. But more importantly, anytime anything new appears on the internet, it will send me an email with a link to say, here is some content that you should know about. Now, I've used the phrase jacketed lab reactors, but if you use your imagination, I'm sure you could come up with other things that you would also like to be monitoring. How about your competitors' names? How about your own company name? How about your other products and services? So essentially, this is a competitive research tool that will allow you to find wherever anything appears on the internet, social or otherwise, that is of interest to your marketing strategy. Now, moving more specifically onto social media marketing, there's another listening tool that I'd like to recommend to you, which is also free, called Hootsuite. Now, what Hootsuite does is allows you to set up these columns and that allows you in your account to monitor what's happening on the social internet. And it will allow you to monitor Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and it will allow you to find anywhere that your company has been mentioned or where your competitors have been mentioned. So in this example, you can see I have a column based on Susan Hallam, which is my name. I have a column for retweets, which is where I'm seeing people who are engaging with me on social media. The third column, by the way, says scheduled. And Hootsuite is phenomenally useful as a social media tool because it will allow me to sit down and in advance schedule my tweets that will drip out over the course of this week. I think managing social media can be very time intensive, and Hootsuite is a great time-saving device that will allow you to pre-schedule your tweets so you do not need to be online all the time. If you're not familiar with Hootsuite, I think this is an important tool for you to get started using. Now, what you're going to find on Hootsuite, however, is that you may find that people are talking about your business and you may not like what they're saying. So another thing that you might want to think about is creating a social media policy that if people are talking about you and they're saying things that you don't like, how are you going to handle it? And in this flow chart, we talk about whether they're talking about victimizing things or incorrect information, unhappy customers, and it's a policy of how do you fix the situation. Now, what's interesting about this document and this flow chart is that this actually comes from the Pentagon in the United States. You are not the first company who's going to be worried about people saying negative things. But what's important in terms of your action plan today is, do you have a policy that will enable you to address it when something bad might happen? Great. So we've covered quite a bit over the last few minutes. I want to do another poll right now, Ben, if I may. And the question would be, is we've spoken about LinkedIn, we've spoken a little bit about Google+, and I'd like to ask you all, which is the social platform most important to your business?
So we just launched the poll now, so you can see your options on there: LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or in fact a blog. And obviously blog platforms come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes and flavors and aromas. So which do you think is most important to your business? And while we allow people to vote on that, I may as well ask the one question that we've had, which is about the LinkedIn Pulse channels. And so the question was, how do you actually discover who the editor is of a LinkedIn Pulse channel? Or do you just have to make yourself, if you pardon the phrase, you have to expose yourself until one of these editors notice? That was a question from Jim Bullock. Thanks for your question, Jim. Susan, what do you think?
Jim, they do not publish the personal names of the editors of these channels. However, if you were to send out a tweet that is addressed to @LinkedIn Pulse. I need to double check the actual syntax on that particular phrase, but if you send out a tweet name checking LinkedIn Pulse, that's where they then listen to the submissions coming in that people are requesting to be considered for the LinkedIn Pulse channel. So the answer is no, you cannot find out who the people are, but when you want to get your articles submitted to LinkedIn Pulse, you do it via Twitter.
That seems a little bit odd in a way, to be using one social media in order to try and capitalize on another, but I guess the different aspects of different social media are useful for different things, which I'm sure is something that you'll come to more in the rest of this webinar. I think we've probably given people enough time to vote now, so we will share those results now. So most people seem to agree with what we've said so far, in that LinkedIn is perceived to be most important to their business. Twitter, Facebook and YouTube are looking reasonably level around the 10% mark, and nobody has actually said that they have a company blog that they think is significantly important. Susan, are you surprised to see that the results for the blog are so low?
This is pretty much exactly what I expected in terms of LinkedIn being #1 on the list. And I would also have to say to you all is, if you were to ask me what is the single most important social media channel for your business, for all of you, I would say it is indeed your blog. Blogging ticks a lot of the boxes. It provides content that can be shared across social channels, and we'll be talking about this at forthcoming events. So no, it doesn't surprise me, Ben, at all.
Okay, well, we will close that down for now and move on. We have had another question. Just as a reminder to everyone, you can get your questions in through that questions box. We have a few in already, but we should have time to try and get through a few of them towards the end of the webinar. So do please keep asking your questions. Just had one in from Mark Reed as well, and we've got a few more lined up. Do ask your questions. Susan is more than happy to answer anything, but for now we'll let Susan carry on with her presentation.
Fantastic. And like Ben said, I do welcome your questions. We're going to have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So what I wanted to do now is to shift gears a little bit to Twitter. And really what I'm often asked about is, oh, for goodness sakes, what can I talk about on Twitter? You know, what on earth shall I be tweeting? And again, I'm not suggesting you're going to be talking about kittens. I'm not talking about goofy stuff like what you had for lunch. And I think if you, the strategy I'd like to recommend to all of you is, there's nothing new under the sun. You guys already have probably good marketing already in place, and what we need to be doing is utilizing this marketing in our social media campaigns. So for example, here's a great tweet that went out from Radley's where they're talking about their case studies. So in this, notice they're talking about their new case study. Notice as well 3 things. The first thing is they are using something called a bit.ly link, and that's bit.ly, and essentially that's called a URL shortener that takes a great big long web address and reduces it down to a minimum number of characters, because you want to make best use of the available space you have when you're sending out a short, brief little tweet. Notice as well that it's using what's called a hashtag, and it's using hash chemistry. We're using a hashtag for this webinar, by the way. Our hashtag is #webinarcw, and what this does is it allows people to join together in conversations. If you don't have a hashtag strategy, again, this is something that I strongly suggest that you learn a little bit more about. So we have a bit.ly short link, we have a hashtag, and most importantly, what do you think about the image that's been attached to this tweet? It's a fantastic image showing the product, showing the quote. It's actually got the case study testimonial visually represented right in it. It's name checking the company who's providing the case study, indeed right down to the individual who's saying it. So you might want to, and we could be scheduling a series of case study tweets that are being sent out on a regular basis, letting our customers and prospective customers know the good news about our business. Another type of tweet that you might want to think about is back to our thought leadership strand. So in this particular case, Radleys are talking about real-time chemistry, material science, and they're using a really interesting example about 3D printing. So have you read something interesting on other in the literature? Is there anything in terms of research reports that you think would be of interest to your target market? This is what I would call sharing the love. And that means it's not necessarily what you have written, but it's what other people have written, and you are sharing their content. If you get a good reputation for sharing other people's content, what do you think might happen in return? Trust me, they might then start to share your content. So again, what we might want to be doing is not necessarily only talking about me, my business, my business, my business, but why don't we talk about other things that are of interest to you and the broader scientific community? Again, can I remind you, we're using hashtags, we're using a URL shortener, and we have a fantastic image accompanying this tweet. And the third example I wanted to talk was another example, share the love, on Twitter. And in this particular case, we're sticking again with the university sector in this particular case, where they are showing pictures of the equipment they're using, and we are retweeting and sharing the information that's coming from one of our customers. Again, it's ticking the box of all the interesting things in terms of hashtags, in terms of short links, and in terms of great photography. And the last example I want to share with you in this section is about integrating your offline and your online. I suspect many of us who are participating in this webinar spend some money doing things on either exhibitions or road shows, seminars and conferences. Are you using your social media to extract maximum value from these events? I believe for most of you, you're going to find going to things like exhibitions is a very expensive enterprise. Are you using social media to get the maximum coverage? So in this particular case, we're talking about where we're exhibiting, we're talking about the university again, and notice again, we've got the photography going on. So in this particular section, what I wanted to do is to briefly give you some ideas of the kinds of content you could be sharing on social media. And in this particular example, while I've stuck to Twitter, I do believe the same rules could apply to LinkedIn, depending on what you're doing, the kind of content that you could be sharing on Facebook. I don't know how active many of you are using Instagram, but I do believe, which is of course the photo sharing site, but I believe in the chemical sciences, you have a highly visual set of products and services. And I think pictures could be telling your story. So I think you need to be thinking about what kind of content do I need to be creating? How can I schedule it? And what's the best channel to send it out on? Okay, so we've been thinking about channels, we've been thinking about content, and what I really wanted to wrap up with now is about measurement. And it's great to talk about measurement because the concern I have with a lot of social media is they say, oh, it's all about things like branding, or it's all about things you can't measure. Of all the marketing channels, digital is definitely the easiest to measure, and it's the one that you can improve on based on what your numbers are telling you. Social media is a numbers game. The problem is that some businesses, in my opinion, focus on the wrong numbers. I go into companies like yours and you say to me, oh, I'm on Twitter and I have 50,000 followers. And I have to say to you, so what? And I would also say to you, the number of followers is an irrational measure because if you wanted a lot of followers, if you give me 50 pounds, I can go buy 100,000 followers for you. The second thing they say to me is, oh, but I tweet 6 times a day. And I look at you and I say, so what? That's just activity. What I need to be looking at is what benefit is it giving your business? Is it helping your marketing activity? So instead of the numbers of followers or the number of tweets or the number of posts where we're simply counting things that are your activity, instead I want to give you now the 4 measures that you should be using in terms of your social media. And if you only learn one thing today, this is the one thing I want you to learn. If you're using social media, you should be measuring conversation. So what that means is if I send out a tweet, that somebody replies to it. If I put something on LinkedIn, somebody comments on it. What conversation is a measure is, are people seeing what I'm saying and are they interested in what I'm saying? The gold standard of interest is called amplification. And that means I put something on LinkedIn that you thought was so interesting that you shared it. So amplification on Twitter would be retweeting. Amplification on LinkedIn is going to be sharing. And this, to me, is the best indication that you are speaking with appropriate, interesting content that is engaging with your target market. We could also be measuring applause. And applause is when people say they like your content. So this is on Twitter. This is where they could be favoriting it. On LinkedIn, we could be liking it. But the big one that's hard for us to measure is going to be economic value. And this is usually where I would steer you back to something like your Google Analytics and your website. And by economic value, what I want to know is, does your social media generate leads for your business? Does your social media keep you close to your customers? And what is the economic value of you investing your people and your effort into using social media? Now, this has been a really quick little webinar. I hope you found it useful so far. It'd be interesting to see what questions you have going on. But what I did want to know, and this is not a sales pitch, but it is a little bit, is to let you know that we are organizing a one-day event that I'll be leading a workshop on the 5th of May, where we are going to be doing a belts and braces, ground-up approach to your social media strategy and tactics. So if you're interested in attending, if you want to book your place, we will be having this social media workshop specifically for the chemical industries on the 5th of May. And what I was hoping that you might get out of a workshop like today is, and this is a messy slide, and it's a messy slide on purpose, is, okay, you've spent 40 minutes of your valuable time with me. What are your actions that you're going to take? What I would really love to do is for me to think that all of you are going to do 3 things when you leave here today. So, Ben, final poll. What are the top actions?
Yes. So this is our last poll for the webinar. We do still have time for a few questions, so we'll let people respond to that. So what 3 activities are now on your social media action plan? So is that strategy and planning, Google Plus for your company, or is that Google are now moving towards something called Google My Business, which is where they're trying to push people who would have traditionally had a Google Plus page, using LinkedIn smarter and better. So that's not just using it more, but using it with the guidelines and the ideas that Susan's just given us. Creating a content plan for status updates, so not just what we've just had for lunch, and not just here's our new product, this is why it's great. That's very important. And of course, are you going to plan on attending the digital marketing workshop on the 5th of May? If you've got a lot from the last 40 minutes, then imagine what a whole day of that is likely to be. Social media is one of those fields where I think you really can do with a great deal of guidance. We're going to give people a little bit more time to fill in that poll. Meanwhile, I'll ask a couple of questions. A very specific and technical question from Laura Elliott that should be a fairly quick answer. You mentioned using Bitly in order to create custom short links and that sort of thing. Laura's just asked, how does that work? How do you create a Bitly link?
So Bitly is a free service that you create a Bitly account. You log into your account, and all you do is paste in the address, let's say the web address, let's say from your website, and it will answer you back with what's called the Bitly short link. But what's also interesting, Laura, that you might want to think about is that you can also create custom links. So what that means is, rather than being bit.ly, we have a Bitly link for hallam.co. And what that means is that our Bitly links are branded. So rather than being Bitly links, they are Hallam links. So to answer your question briefly, it's a free service. You create a free Bitly account, you paste in the address that you want to shorten, and it just gives you the link back.
And of course, the advantages of registering and having a shortened domain like that go beyond your own activity, because if other people shorten the link from your website using Bitly, it will carry across your branding, it'll carry across your name. So for example, the Royal Society of Chemistry, if somebody uses Bitly to share any website from within the Royal Society of Chemistry's domain, so any of Chemistry World Stories, for example, then the Bitly link it creates is rsc.ly. So you can push your branding above and beyond your own efforts by setting up that Bitly link. Let's have a look at some of these other questions. This might be quite a quick one. Jaspreet has asked how often you should share or update your status, or how often you should be writing blogs. Are there any hard and fast rules for that, Susan?
The frequency of update is a really, really good question, and I think it's going to vary. So, for example, if I'm at an exhibition this week, I'm going to be updating my social statuses very, very frequently because I've got things to say, I'm engaging with folk who are at the show, so I'm going to have a different kind of level of activity if there's other things going on. However, with regards to platforms like blogging and LinkedIn posts, I think what you want to do is you need to be updating it when you've got something to say. So you're going to be probably doing it less frequently. I would have thought as a minimum, if you do have a good blog and a successful blog, you're going to be writing probably at least 2 blog posts a month. And again, what you may have is a content calendar where you're scheduling the kind of content that you want to be creating. Within our own business, we blog more frequently, so there really isn't a one-size-fits-all answer, except it needs to be appropriate and suited to your audience.
Thank you very much. Simon Rushworth has asked a similar question. He said how much new content is needed to really make an impact and to get noticed. So if you're starting from scratch, what sort of volume of content do you need to be thinking about creating? And how does that then compare to the amount that you need once you've made yourself, created a position? Can you then tail that back a bit? Do you need less content to maintain an audience than you need to develop one?
Yeah, so again, another good question, Simon. I think what we need to think about is if you're new to this game, or if let's say you're a new business, what you may find is that you want to be leveraging other people's content simply because you're not going to have the resource to be creating it. So if there's important pieces being published in the literature, if there's interesting research reports, your content could be simply to comment on it and to add value. So this will enable you to create content that's unique to you, that does add your personal company spin, but it doesn't require you to generate whole new pieces of content. However, what you will also find, particularly with startup, if you're in a startup position, would be is by creating a few very high quality pieces of content, you're going to get a lot of traction out of it. So for as a startup activity, sometimes writing something like one exceptionally good white paper will then enable you to share it on Twitter, publish it on LinkedIn, get all kinds of traction on it. So sometimes, again, I think the question should really be more about quality necessarily than about quantity. The other thing you'll find is that as you get more established, rather than taking your foot off the accelerator, if you start to see the benefits of using social media, and in particular content generation, it's going to be, we typically find that you want to be creating even more. And that's because you realize that for every piece of content you create, you get 6 new inquiries or 6 new leads. So I think your brain will start to associate the benefit of good social media with the kind of business benefits that makes it easy for you to justify this activity.
And of course, that's all part of the thought leadership step, isn't it? If you are seen to be commenting on other people's posts and commenting with something valuable, then you start to establish a position for yourself as being someone that should be listened to.
Yep.
But we're just going to close this poll now and show you the results. We still have a few more minutes for questions at the end. And so here's the results that we've got. It's a pretty good spread. A little disappointed to see that there aren't more people hoping on coming to the digital marketing workshop, but at least 9% of the people who've come along, we will see you at Burlington House in May. But it does seem that the strategy and the being smart about social media rather than just using social media, that seems to be a message that people have got through.
And I have to say thanks for that, guys. That was probably one of my main objectives for today, is for you, I think, to think about what we're doing.
Okay, well, we do have a few more minutes for questions. I mean, we have had quite a few through of various varying levels of technical. So I guess one of the things that most people will want to achieve from social media, the goal they will set themselves, is to drive customers, to drive prospects and leads to their website. And Robert Lenk has asked exactly how we do that. How can you use social media to drive traffic?
Okay, so if we in terms of driving traffic, what you might want to think about is what I mentioned to you earlier in terms of how important a blog might be. A blog, of course, is a place where you can write articles, generate content, and if you created a centerpiece blog post, again, of exceptional quality, we're going to be using social media by mentioning facts from that piece. We could be tweeting images that are contained in your blog. And the idea would be that the underlying principle is, if you want to learn more, click here to see the rest of our article, or click here to see additional ways of using this equipment. Click here if you want tips and tricks on how to make your lab greener. So what we're going to be doing is, if we use our website as the centerpiece for our content repository strategy, then we're going to be using social media to do the promotion, to say, click here to learn more. The other way to do it would be if any of you are interested in the trade press, which I think will be important to many of you listening, journalists are incredibly interested in social media. And if you think of journalists, what do they want? They want a story. When do they want it? They want it now. So are you using Twitter, let's say, to engage with journalists, to let them know about stories and unique stories that they can have the first angle on? And again, that will drive, in this case, journalists to your website, which again has this huge virtuous circle effect of amplifying your marketing activity.
I guess they're the real target when you're talking about amplification, are those people who will get your name, your brand, your story into the wider press. We've had a question from Alan Malcolm that I think harks back to the answer you've just given and a few before. But he says, what's the best social media platform for a business? Or is it a mixture of the different platforms that provides the results we're looking for?
I think it's a really good question, Alan, and I think the issue is going to depend, it really does depend on two things. The best social platform is going to be a function of A, what are you trying to achieve? So if you're trying to achieve lead generation, that's going to be one set of platforms. If you're trying to achieve customer intimacy, staying close to your existing customers, it might be a different platform. So the first goal you want to be thinking a little bit about is, what are you trying to achieve with your social marketing? And then the second thing is, you need to be thinking about your customers themselves. Where do they hang out? What social channels do they use? Where are they going to be comfortable interacting with you? And I think it's a balancing act about what are you trying to achieve and what do they want. And that's going to give you, more than likely, a mix of tools. The secret sauce, though, the secret sauce is getting the right balance of your time. Because I do know how busy all of you are, and social media can be very time intensive, so we want to make sure you're spending your right time on activities that are going to give you the greatest return on investment.
Thank you very much. That is always the return on investment, isn't it? We just had a very interesting question from David Hanna, actually. He has asked if you're aware of any lessons learned from using social media for business to customer communication, and how that can be applied to business, and whether they're really completely different beasts.
Again, business to customer versus business to business, B2B versus B2C. I would argue that the kind of things that we've spoken about today also apply to B2C. What's your strategy? What do your customers want? What are you looking to achieve? And as you say, in terms of B2C work, we're going to be using, I would argue, very similar measures. Do your customers engage with you? Do your customers amplify what you're saying? So I think there's on the one hand, a huge body of literature that talks about the differences between B2B and B2C, but equally, I think there are lessons that can be learned across both. By the way, if you're interested in B2B as well, you might want to Google social media for boring industries. And that's another big research area, particularly talking about the scientific community, ironically. I don't agree with it, but I think that's one concern, is that people think that business-to-business marketing isn't as sexy and as exciting as cosmetics or cars. But I don't think that's the case. I think your customers are just as passionate about your business as you are.
That feeds in, actually, I'd say, to Gemma Maria's question, in terms of if you are in an industry that isn't perceived to be perhaps as sexy or as exciting, how do you actually get customers or get people, the right people in particular, to be reading, let's say, your Twitter feed?
Exactly. And again, I think that's another exceptionally good question to think about. What we want, in many instances, I think with B2B social media marketing, it's not about quantity as much as it's about quality. And what that means is I don't need 10,000 people following me on Twitter. I actually want 100 or 200 or 500 perfect people. So what we need to be doing is identifying, and there are tools that I can show you that allow you to measure how influential people are in your particular sector. We need to be engaging with the right people, whether they be influencers or whether they be customers or whether they be prospects. And you need to keep in mind that most of the people who work in the professions like these industries, they actually do like what they do. They do want to stay abreast of latest developments. They do want to have a green lab, or they do just. So I think we need to just get under the skin of our customers and to create the kind of content that they want to see. One of the manufacturers I work with has worked in the chemical industry for, I don't know, more than 50 years, and they have a wonderful archive of historic photographs. And again, their customers love to see pictures from the past of the kind of chemistry equipment that they were using back then. So you just need to put your creative thinking cap on and think, what kind of things would your customer like?
Thank you very much. We're very nearly out of time. I have one question from myself, actually, but first I just wanted to let everyone know, in the GoToWebinar system, you should now see that there is a handout file that has been made available to you. That's a PDF version of this presentation. So if you wanted to look back through anything that we have discussed, then that handout is there. The recording of this webinar will also be made available in probably around a week, around 7 days' time. We'll make that recording available to you as well. So my question, I guess it sort of falls a little bit above the particular platforms we've been looking at, but social media platforms come and go. A few years ago, nobody really used Twitter, or nobody really knew what Twitter was. Certainly 10 years ago, even Facebook was in its infancy. Is it best to make sure that your social strategy is that broad? It is a social strategy that then uses the right platforms, or do you think because of the popularity, it is actually worth having a LinkedIn strategy, a Facebook strategy, a Twitter strategy?
Well, I'm going to answer it in a slightly different way. If we were to look at some of the biggest trends, I hope, just stick with me for 1 minute. If we look at the biggest trends for 2016, I would say one of the biggest strategies, the biggest areas for us to all be thinking about in terms of digital actually would be mobile. And I think you'll find that I suspect most of you have iPads that you use at home. You all read your email on your smartphone. And social media is actually really easy to use and widely used on a mobile platform. So I guess what we're looking at is you need to be thinking about, what do our customers want to be using? The second thing to think about is the difference between strategy and tactics. So when we think, if my strategy is to stay close to my customers, then LinkedIn is a tactical way of doing it. So we need to be thinking from like you said, Ben, from a higher level, what are we trying to achieve? And essentially what we want to be doing is using the technologies most appropriate to our customers. The second thing that we want to think about is tactically, which of the channels are going to be working the best, yeah. But because it is such a rapidly changing field, I think the biggest risk to those participating in the webinar today is that you go chasing after all these new platforms, whereas you really need to be focusing on what's important. And if you were to really ask me what's important, before you even start using social media, do you have a website that you're proud of? So again, I see a lot of people putting a huge effort into their social media, and actually they have a rubbish website. If the objective of your social media is to drive people to the site, surely you should be sorting your website out first and then starting to deliver these social campaigns.
That seems like very good advice to me. Thank you ever so much, Susan. That was Susan Hallam. Thank you for joining us, everybody. As I've said, the webinar will be available to view in about a week's time. You'll be able to see the video, or grab that handout now and you'll be able to read through everything. We do hope that we will see you in May at Burlington House for a more in-depth look at how social media can benefit your business. I'm Ben Valster, and this has been a Chemistry World webinar. Thanks very much.